formulated the contrast between realism, conceptualism, and nominalism as a contrast in attitudes toward universals. Universals are real and mind independent, or they're real but mind dependent, or they're not real at all. However, in the 20th century, these kinds of discussions about Platonism or realism, conceptualism, nominalism, tended to be formulated in a somewhat different way. For a long time, brought up in that tradition myself, I thought of these as fundamentally about another closely related but nevertheless distinct distinction. I am now convinced, however, that that's a mistake, that there really is a separate issue. So let me explain why. Universals can have multiple instances. Particulars cannot. There's only one of those. It's tempting to think that universals are abstract objects, triangularity, blue, friendship. In fact, the terms we use for those tend to be called abstract nouns. Whereas particulars are things that are concrete individuals, like you and me, or a particular recording. However, that is not the way it always goes. We could draw a related distinction between things that are abstract and things that are concrete. And does it always line up? Maybe, but I doubt it. Here's why. What do I mean by an abstract object? An abstract object is outside of space and time. It isn't located in any particular place or any particular time. An abstract entity is something, moreover, that doesn't enter into causal relations. So it is not in space and time, and not causally related to things that are in space and time. Concrete entities are in space-time, and they are causally related. Now, do those distinctions match up? Well, it is certainly true that many universals are abstract, and many abstract entities are universals. That many concrete entities are particulars, and that, conversely, particulars are often concrete. You and I, for example, are located in space-time. We do causally interact with other things in space-time in our environments. We're clearly concrete particulars. And there are a variety of abstract universals, things like justice, for example. But do those distinctions line up completely? Perhaps not. The question is really this: can there be universals that are concrete? Can we have abstract particulars? Maybe the answer is yes. An abstract particular might be something like the number 1, or pi, or the empty set, for example. It's a particular number, a particular set. There is just one of it. On the other hand, it seems abstract. It's not something that has a location in space-time. It's not causally related to other things. Conversely, you might have universals that are concrete, that are located in space-time and are causally related to people, but can have multiple instances. Arguably, blue is an example of that. I can perceive the color blue right there. And so you might think of that as an example. If you don't like that, you could say, well, at least that triangle's being blue, the blue of that triangle, the blue in the circle, that square's blueness, that square's color, is something I can perceive. So it looks as if I am causally related to it, but on the other hand, that square's color might also be found, identical in fact, to this triangle's color. And that would suggest that this really is a universal that has multiple instances, even though it is something that is causally related to us. So, in general, it seems possible, even though the common thing is to have abstract universals and concrete particulars, we can have abstract particulars and concrete universals. So the question of whether abstract entities exist, and if so, whether they're dependent on the mind, that's a question that is related to our problem, but a slightly different question. And you could, for example, be a realist about one of these categories and a nominalist about the other. It would be a surprising view, especially since there's such a large overlap. But they do seem to be distinct questions. One final point. The contrast between realism, conceptualism, and nominalism is something that we find in many different areas of philosophy. With respect to something like moral facts, for example, or moral properties, we say wrongness. It's something we might describe as a real constituent of the world. Some things are wrong. Those acts have the property in the world of being wrong, independently of what anybody thinks about it. You might think, instead, that wrongness is a constituent of the world, but something that we construct. And so we classify those things as wrong, and it is something that is there but dependent on the mind. Or you could be a nominalist. You could say there's no such thing as wrongness, but we use the term wrong, and we do it on the basis of certain rules. Nevertheless, we don't need to talk about the reality of a concept or a reality outside of our minds or even our use of language. Well, that suggests that this kind of division, this kind of question, is found not only in the issue about the reality of universals or abstract objects, but about moral properties, about all sorts of things across many different areas of philosophy. It has multiple instances, so I suppose you could say our general problem is one that is itself a universal.